name's Andrew Broughton. I live in Airdrie, Alberta, and I've been doing live sound my whole life. My current and latest gig is Rain, a tribute to the Beatles touring show. Been with them for 11 years, and we'd probably still be out right now if it wasn't for COVID. I'm also a computer programmer. I enjoy software that does automation, control systems, things like that. My latest work has to do with controlling mixers over the internet. I've also written some companion modules for controlling Yamaha and Allen and Heath consoles. And yeah, like that. I was interested in learning more. And if you're interested in anything I'm doing, check me out at www.checkcheck12.com. That's all spelled out in letters, CHECKONETWO. That's my site, and thanks for listening.
Hi, my name's Dave Node, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I fell in love with technical theater in high school, and that led into mixing live sound at theme parks and doing lights and media at the time, which was 35mm slides. I also got to work on concerts for bands like Chicago and the B-52s. I started my first sound and lighting company back in 1986. Over the past decade and a half, I've had the privilege to work for mostly Fortune 100 end clients. I got to travel all over North America and Canada and Mexico and the Caribbean and even Hawaii. I find myself doing main screen switch, camera switch, running media servers, doing projection, all sorts of V1 positions. With a bachelor's degree in technical theater design, Epson ACE certification, Christie projection switching certifications, and recently Barco Level 2 certifications, I get to design and execute some really challenging and fun projects now. During the pandemic, I dove into the social media side of our industry. I've written articles on virtual solutions and facilitated owner sessions for Avixa. During one of my weekly Zoom panels and cocktail parties, I was reintroduced to Omar, who turned me on to AV Educate. It's been a pleasure to participate in the AV Educate Facebook page and to share my experience on the AV Tech Talks panel. I love supporting my industry colleagues with education and mentorship during these challenging times. Thanks for tuning in.
AV Tech Talks, House Rules. Join us on AVE Live, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us on Zoom. Watch on Facebook or YouTube from the AV Educate page, or register as an attendee for the webinar. Live Q&A. Our guest will lead us through a guided demo and conversation about tonight's topic. We will take your questions and comments throughout the show. Don't wait until the end. Get your questions and comments in early to shape the conversation. We don't know it all. We're human and don't claim to know everything. We may demonstrate or discuss one way to do something, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. If you found another way that is easier or yields better results, please share with the community so we can all learn together. Follow AV Educate. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and have a library of content on YouTube. Join us on Zoom for AV Tech Talks and to become a member of our community on Discord, where the conversations, the learning, and the sharing continues. We are where you are. Place your phone over the QR code to come learn more about AV Educate.
Hey, no audio on
AGT.
Facebook. Sorry, no audio is on Facebook.
No, you're fine. I'll let him correct that, but that's really it for now.
You're muted there, Ed.
Looks like we're back. Sorry about that, folks. That was a mistrigger on vMix, so I apologize that we did not get audio on the top of that show. And it was such a perfect intro that I feel like I can't reproduce it. But essentially, tonight we're talking about Zoom, but it's a special night because we have the event specialist team members, Sam and Kevin. They're gonna be here to answer our questions, tell us about a case study. So thank you guys for letting us know that we didn't have audio. That was just a misfire here in vMix. Sorry about that. And when you saw everyone raise their hand, it was because I asked everybody who's used Zoom before, and clearly we are all on Zoom right now. If you haven't joined us on Zoom, if you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, you can do that. We'll post links in those chats if you want to join us on the Zoom webinar. But either way, get your questions in the chats that you're in wherever you're watching tonight. So with that, Leland was just telling us a little bit about how he produces Zoom events. So I don't know, Leland, if you want to take it again or if we want to move on.
And for those that didn't get to hear what I was referring to, is Ed simply asked me what types of Zoom virtual events we've worked on recently. Started with COVID back in the summer of 2020. We helped the Public Health Institute produce their national opioid crisis for 2021, a summit that was done across the entire U.S. We also had an event take place at the end of that year for a Berry Festival event. And we worked with PRO, which is the Professional Referees Organization, to do the Major League Soccer rundown for the 2021 season, which they're hoping to obviously get back out in the fields and play their game. But we have several others coming down the pike from Fortune 500 companies and the like.
You're muted there, Ed.
Sorry about that. I was told I have digital crickets, so I'm trying to manage my muting as well. Who else on the panel is using Zoom for virtual production? Dave, love to hear from you.
Yeah, we've done more corporate and industrial type stuff. Just did something for the Mint Museum Auxiliary here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We brought in a famous interior designer and fed it out to a live shoot from the local country club, one of the local country clubs here in Charlotte, out to all the folks who couldn't make it in person. We've done an investor day for a major window and door manufacturer in 12 time zones. We had to start at 2 in the morning every morning. And that was 13 boxes pipped up, fed into Zoom so that 250 sites could view it. And we had 3 live sets called in, and then we were interacting with 9 virtual remote presenters, all coming in Zoom, one-to-one breakouts through hardware. So
That's pretty awesome, actually. Cool. Is there anybody else who wants to share anything about what they've been doing lately with Zoom and virtual? No? All right, great. Then with that, we'll kick it to Sam and Kevin. Tell us what you guys are doing, I guess, at the event specialist team. And I don't know that everybody even knew there was an event specialist team. So maybe, fill us in on what your guys' role is and how big is the team, things like that. Love to hear about it, Sam.
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me. But yeah, so my name is Sam Kokajko. I lead the event specialist team, which is part of event services here at Zoom. Previously, we were known as the Pro Events team. We've somewhat rebranded and merged with another team here at Zoom to expand out a little bit. But yeah, we are a specialized team at Zoom that is focused on events with Zoom, be that anything from Zoom native events, just standard best practices on webinar, all the way up to what my team, the event specialist team, focuses on, which is lots of production. So we're working with companies like those that you guys work for on different event designs, trying to really push the limits of what's possible using Zoom, doing stuff like Dave was just talking about, taking multiple different calls, merging them together with hardware matrices, different form factors of doing like a studio audience via Zoom within meetings to get all their cameras back, putting that up on the video walls, and then using that within or as a source for larger webinars. But one of the things that we definitely heard a lot was the sort of that surprise that there is a team at Zoom that's doing this, that Zoom has people who can talk to production. And so that's why we really kind of are doing this. I'm calling it my little mini press tour here as we went to the test kitchen on Friday and then coming here today to really kind of help get the word out to you guys that there is someone paying attention at Zoom. We are focusing on virtual events a lot, and there's someone to help. I can't tell you how many times I end up where someone finally gets to me and my team to talk to us about, hey, we've got this big event coming up. Here's what we need to do. And we go, oh yeah, cool. Well, just get me in touch with the guy running your switcher. Let's talk about how we're going to structure it. Because this is what we're doing day in, day out.
Cool. So how big is the team? You said it was 2 teams that merged. How many people do you have working?
We've got about 40 people through event services, and that includes global coverage. So we have people all the way. We've got them in Sydney, EMEA, Singapore, all over the US. So we've got coverage completely around the globe.
Okay, that makes sense. So about 7 billion people on the planet and 40 people for
About
Zoom events.
40 people from Zoom, which, you know what, I remember talking with Jeff as we were prepping for Test Kitchen. And, one of the things he kind of brought up was like, hey, do you think anybody's going to kind of look at you guys as a competitor doing some of these event services things? You're doing some small production. And my message to you is the same as it was when I was working on the Zoom Rooms side of things. Talking to integrators all day about why, yes, Zoom has a team. They have a professional services team that installs Zoom Rooms. And no, that's not competition for you, because there's so many people using Zoom. There are so many shows to switch in good ways. Really, we are a sign that Zoom wants you guys to be successful. We are here to make you successful in your events, to make events on Zoom successful. That's our goal. That's why we're here. In the process, we're going to end up doing some of them directly. We're also going to the first question, anytime a customer gets tossed over to me, the first question I ask is, cool, so you've got this annual event that's going to be virtual this year. How do you do it last year? Who's your events company? Bring them to this meeting. Let's talk to them about how they're going to do your event this year, because I don't want to replace anybody. I couldn't. We can't keep up that sort of scale. Instead, we are kind of the strategic SWAT team to come in and help, and also help link some of these ideas back to the product team and really make sure that the events industry is heard from a product standpoint for how is Zoom used in the real world? How is it used in all these different events? How can it be used? What can the future look like?
So yeah, it sounds like besides doing maybe some in-house where you're fully taking it on, you're collaborating with the providers, the vendors, like many of us here on the panel would be. So you're working alongside to support those events, especially larger ones, I'm sure.
Right. There's definitely shows where, like as a show that people know we were involved in, the Emmys, when we worked on the Emmys, that didn't change at all the staffing. They just said it'd be really great if we had somebody from Zoom who could be on our comms call with us and be in touch and be able to look at some of the back end stuff. And that's something that my team is able to provide. There are also shows that are smaller shows where we're handling them all the way top to bottom, sort of soup to nuts. And then of course we do so many internal shows, but even our internal shows, we're bringing in production wherever it's needed. We're definitely not a replacement. We are an additional resource.
That's great. So what are some of the tools that you guys are using when you're producing events? There's a ton of integrations that Zoom supports, and I know that the Zaps have been kind of talked about for a long time. So what are some of the things that you guys are using and that you're excited about from a tools perspective that maybe some of us might not be aware of or could start leveraging if we knew more about them?
Yeah. So on a really high level, one of the things I do end up telling customers, or especially production companies, if they come to us and they say, hey, we have this big customer, what do we get if we use you? The answer is kind of nothing special. You get people who know Zoom inside and out, who come from a broadcast production place. You don't need us for anything. We don't have special backend access to anything else. Even on our own very own Zoom events. We did our earnings call a week ago tomorrow, and there was nothing special done to it. There was no like optimization of data centers or anything. That doesn't exist. Instead, we're using the product the same way you guys are using it. We're using it in a good way. We're spending our days in it completely, so we know what we're doing with it, as do many and most of you. Don't in any way take that as a slight. You guys are pros at this. I see what you guys do, and it's just awesome. I live for it, man. But as far as the tools that we do use, it's a lot of the same stuff you guys are using. We are using Zoom OSC. We go back and forth between using Zoom OSC versus Zoom Rooms whenever we're doing production stuff based on a couple different pieces. But we use a lot of Zoom OSC. We use a lot of Stream Deck and Companion. We personally, and actually I'm going to go and take a quick break for Omar to see if he's raising his hands.
Sorry, you could have finished. My question was,
Okay.
I like this combination you're doing where you're combining yourself with the teams. Has there been anything that you've learned from that method, right? Instead of just you doing yourselves kind of figuring out and hearing feedback, was there anything that you either got feedback-wise from crews, or by doing these shows, you're like, oh, these guys are constantly saying they do this. This makes sense why they do this. Now let's have Zoom optimize it for this workflow because this makes sense now. Did you guys have any scenarios like that where you were working on things and that kind of like aha moment came in from being a part of these teams?
So, I'm not sure if this fully answers it or not, but I will say that one of the things that I have particularly is like I am constantly on calls personally with the webinar product team and the Zoom events product team, the on Zoom product team. And I know like even before our session on Friday, I was actually meeting with the Zoom events product manager right beforehand to see like, hey, what am I allowed to leak in this call? What can I actually tell people? And he gave me some pointers and stuff. And I asked him something. I asked him about one specific thing. I was like, well, okay, how does this work? Is it A or B? And he went, right. Yeah, we hadn't thought about it yet. So there's all sorts of like really crazy feedback that we're able to give. And we're definitely very invested. Stuff that there were 3 or 4 different things on the session on Friday that we got out of the Q&A where we went, yeah, no, that's a good way of thinking about it. And we're able to take that back to the product team. With that, obviously it's a full software company, so the product like development cycle has some time to it, but it definitely is heard, and the feature velocity is very fast. This, I guess, just because of the timeline we're looking at, we haven't seen a whole ton of really major things on the event side kind of come to fruition. But if any of you guys have used Dante in Zoom Rooms, that was my feature request back like 3 years ago. And also if any of you guys use room control, the IP-based room control, that actually I pitched to them for the first time the night of the very first Zoomtopia. I actually was sitting with them after we finished up production that day and sat down with them and said, hey, it would be so cool if in our rooms, like this isn't that hard. It's just TCP packets. We just need to send some stuff to all these different devices. Let's just build that into our controller so we don't have to have a full control system. So that's a little bit longer life cycle there that you can see, but some very real turnaround of major features.
Sorry, there we go. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I've used Dante once or twice, so that's a very exciting thing that I'm glad you're the brainchild for that. And the sarcasm there is that I'm like a full Dante nut. So yeah, love it. So I would love to see if there's any questions here from the panel before we jump into some of the questions that we're starting to get in on social. Anybody have anything for us?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Leo. Oh, sorry, Leo, and then Dave.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're sharing with us, Sam, and it's super interesting, as you say, that where we come from in delivering our shows, it's you always sit there and go, what tools have they got that we haven't got, and then you realise that you've got the same toolkit that we have. One of the things that we always get asked when we're trying to do things is, how can we bump our shows up to the 1080? Especially clients have gone and already registered it, and we're like, are there any magic ways apart from requesting this to get that sort of thing? Because it's just that you see a show that isn't, and then you just go, we could have made this look so much better if we had an opportunity.
Sure. So let's dig in, man. HD. So, I've seen a lot of things about, like, actually there was some talk earlier in here about like the portal trick. Somebody had their portal and we're setting it up. The Facebook portal trick, or it's the Zoom room trick, really, is if you get a Zoom room into a call, the call happens at 7:20. Now that's only going to affect meetings, not webinars. But the big thing here now is if you go to support.zoom.us and you look at the page on Group HD, you're going to see a big flag there and a note that says, basically, since March of 2020, with the massively increased demand, HD has basically been deactivated with a couple different rules. The rules are one-to-one calls can have HD, and that's going to be 720. And then if there's a Zoom room involved, it can also have 720. Neither of those get 1080, but they both get 720. One caveat that I'm going to go ahead and give right off the bat is that the difference between 360 and 720 on Zoom is absolutely massive. The difference between 720 and 1080 on Zoom is not that big. And we're going to dig in a little bit more on that and why it's important to kind of keep that in mind, because 1080 is somewhere between hard and sometimes impossible to get. 720 is easily attainable and absolutely a requirement for, in my opinion, every show where you're doing any form of switching. If you're going to have any form of lower thirds, graphics overlay, anything like that into the camera channel, to me, it is a dead set requirement that you do that at 720. Personally, 360, our eyes have gotten used to it. If I just have a talking head here, 360 can be accepted. It's okay. No one's going to be excited about it, but it's okay. But as soon as I throw a lower third on there, or I switch this out for a pre-show graphic or something like that with hard lines with small text, it's a lost battle. You have to be in 720. So to get 720, there is an HD whitelist. You need to get on the whitelist. The way to get onto the whitelist is to send in a support ticket. It has to come from the account owner. Technically, it needs to be a business or enterprise level account. And I think that's what we talked about a little bit with some of the panels beforehand, was some kind of sharing of those accounts, subleasing of them, which might be against terms of service. And I'm not going to suggest you do, but do what you need to do. But as far as that, if you send in a support ticket and you put in there that, hey, this is just a pro account, but we're using it for production, we're doing this with it, we're taking it as a source input into a switcher, there are some exceptions that can be made to that policy. So make sure that you put that case in there when you submit your support ticket, support.zoom.us, and you submit the ticket saying, hey, here's my account, I need this one whitelisted for HD because I'm using it for production, because I'm using it as an input switcher. They're going to go hit some flags in the back end. You also, if that's going to be used to host webinars, you also want to specifically mention that and specifically ask for 1080p HD in webinars. That's going to give you some extra stuff. So from there, after you get that whitelist, you're going to go look in your Zoom account settings. And in there, in the basic account settings for the user that you are scheduling from, the meetings or webinars that you're scheduling from, go to that user, go look at Group HD. And normally it's just going to give you a checkbox, Group HD on off. If you've already talked to support, they're going to hit some flags. You're now going to have a radio button to choose between 720 and 1080. That is one of the signs that you can see that something has happened. It doesn't necessarily mean you're on the whitelist, especially if you already had that pre all of this whitelist, then it's kind of meaningless. But if you didn't, this is a sign that they started to hit switches. So you go there, you find your 1080, turn that on. Obviously, within the Zoom client, all the devices that you want to have a camera at HD have to have that tick box set for HD. Mobile devices are not going to operate in HD, only desktops. So that's another gotcha. One quick gotcha. My camera right now, anyone who's on the webinar could pin me up and look at me in statistics. I'm going to be at 720 because I've got a virtual background in Zoom. Virtual background in Zoom, never going to be above 720 for right now. Don't talk roadmap. It's 720, not 1080. Versus about half the guys on here. I actually pinned everybody individually earlier to check, and about half of you are at 1080, half are at 720. But it's kind of all down to that. When you're doing webinar, if you're in meetings, that's about it. There's one big caveat with meetings, And that is the way Zoom works at a super technical level is it's sending 3 different resolutions of video at the same time, all the time. It's sending you your HD, it's sending a 360, and it's sending a 180 or a smaller one. That HD one can either be 720 or 1080. One thing that can happen is I get into a meeting with 25 people and all of us can do 1080 and it's great. And we're all showing 1080. And then one person joins on a really old desktop machine, not mobile. Mobile won't do this because mobile's just going to take that 360, but a really old desktop machine of some kind, really slow processor. It can handle 720, but it can't handle 1080. Everything's going to step down to 720 to accommodate them. It's going to do that because it knows that 720 is way better than 360 and 1080 is marginally better than 720. So it's going to say the best experience for the world here is that we all see 720. But do look out for that. That's one of the reasons why like one-to-ones might be better on the meeting side of things versus if you have like a bunch of panelists in there, one of the panelists has a bad desktop computer, could kind of wreck your show. And also, I guess I say wreck your show. It doesn't because, again, 720 is really good. 1080 is better. 720 is really good. So then we start talking webinar. When you go webinar, those meeting settings for that user all mattered. The group HD matters. But then once we get inside a webinar, when you're scheduling the actual webinar session, there's going to be some additional checkboxes there. These are also going to show up after that support ticket when they hit some more flags on the back end. And that's going to ask you if you want to operate your screen share in HD, if you want, which I think that one shows up all the time, if you want your video to be in HD, and then and whether you give that to attendees. One of the things that's really important to remember, like right now we're in a webinar, it is possible for us to have 1080 from the panelist side of things, which kind of operates more like a meeting, while the attendees are still only getting 360. So it's a really important thing for me, whenever we're doing a show with webinar, we always make sure that one of my team is joining up as an attendee with the statistics window open and watching those statistics from a desktop computer as an attendee in real time. That way they can see what's the attendee experience, what resolution are they getting. They're also the ones who are giving me my last minute, like, hey, you're having network issues, switch to the backup or anything like that. It's that error check is always really, really important. So you get some additional checkboxes there. You're going to check all those. And then the last one of which is going to be send 1080p to attendees at all times. Go ahead, Leland.
No, that was where I was headed with that, was whether or not that was a feature set that's available. If we're looking at these higher end productions for Fortune 500s, public institutes, you know, things of that nature, we're definitely going to want to be able to lock a 1080 into a webinar. And it sounded for a moment there that there wasn't that capability, but I think you're going there.
Right, exactly. So you hit all the way down to that checkbox and that locks all your attendees to 1080. And now, of course, at the same time, all of this being said, this is kind of like what the webinar or meeting is operating at. If I'm connected up as a panelist and my internet drops, I might only send 360 if that's all my network uplink can handle. Or as an attendee, if I'm watching and I'm watching on a phone, I'm 360. If my network is having issues, Zoom is always going to continue to do its adaptive, but you need this kind of like meeting threshold to be high. That way everything can operate there, network conditions withstanding.
And if I could just piggyback on that for a sec. So another important aspect to remember is if you're not requesting a big enough video box to be sent or to be received, then HD is not going to kick it. It's gonna downscale. If your video screen or your window that you're viewing the Zoom call in is small, that's all that's being asked of Zoom. It's not going to try to send any more than that. So it's always best to make sure your window's at the very least large. We like to just go ahead and go full screen with the panelist that's talking, as well as an attendee on the other end. That way, that 1080 or 720 signal is being received and sent at the same time.
So, and that kind of leads into my pro tip to walk away from for the day is, whenever you're in the Zoom app, you want to know what you're sending, what you're receiving, go to your Zoom settings within the app, go to the statistics page and the video pane or the video tab. It'll show you in real time. If you have an account that has dashboard access, you can see this for everybody, but it's not quite as real time. It has about a minute lag as it kind of averages. So I definitely like going there, and that's your bam. So definitely like get in a meeting with your other guys and experiment with it and start looking at like, testing once you get this whitelist. Yeah, it works. Congratulations. but also B, as you start looking around there, you can see, as I resize my Zoom window, if I put somebody up full screen, I pin someone, or I'm watching the active speaker of them, and I change my screen, I can see that resolution change on my receive as it kind of clicks up to 720 and to 1080, depending on my window size. If I'm watching on a 1080 monitor and I have my window half the size, it's not going to give me even 720 at that point. If I start to make it bigger, at some point it's going to click, turn into 720. But the big thing is when you, your send is also going to be preserved. So if I'm in a meeting and every single person watching the meeting is watching in gallery view, or they have their window really small, I'm never going to send HD because no one needs HD from me. It's only going to send what is needed on the download side. It's always going to preserve my upload. So you have to make sure that there's at least one person in active speaker, or if you hit spotlight, bam, everybody got kicked to active speaker. And you can kind of see how that goes as you predict. Go ahead, Omar.
Sorry about that. So I just wanted to open up real quick with some questions we got here from the Facebook side. YouTube's a little bit quiet right now. I want to give a big shout out to James Hutchison real quick too for giving us some stars. I'm assuming Chris hooked that up because I wasn't aware we had the stars options. But Sam, so the first question I got here from James Hutchinson is, the obvious question would be any info, and this was before we started talking, I started asking what questions would be out there, but he says the obvious question would be if Zoom video and audio for NDI feeds, is that a thing coming out? Is that going to be integrated more?
Yeah, so I do not typically talk roadmap, but I've gotten specific go ahead to give some roadmap on two specific areas, and that's one of them. And that is that NDI is coming to Zoom Rooms. It is not coming to Zoom Desktop at the moment. It is coming to Zoom Rooms. As far as the exact timing, I don't have. What I can say is that there are Zoom Room releases in June and there are Zoom Room releases in September. So we, at this point, are expecting it in one of those two. That NDI is going to be, it's going to operate kind of like pinning. So you'll be able to go in and select which person you want to pin out to an NDI sort of virtual screen, which is going to end up out on your network. Not going to get too much into specifics, not going to nail a number on how many you'll be able to do, but specifically, one thing you'll be able to do with it is you will be able to do isolated audio. So you'll have a checkbox to say, I want isolated audio on these NDI feeds. And the reason that's really important is it kind of negates the need to care how many streams I get out. Because even if I can only get one stream out of a computer, my problem is I have a panel of 5 people that I want to take into my switcher. I want to take it into vMix and I want to do my thing. So I got 5 people on my Zoom call. It's one Zoom call, 5 people. I need 5 NDI streams out. If I have isolated audio, I care if I have to use 5 computers to join, but I care less because I could use 5 computers to join. You can't normally do that without isolated audio because those 2 Zoom machines, the audio and the video will be in sync with itself. But if I use the audio from computer 1, while I have to use the video from computer 3, because they all have the same mixed audio, so I can't just be like switching audio in between, they kind of live in different time domains. So if I have to switch to video 3 from audio 1, they are not guaranteed to be in sync. And it could be actually really bad. There was actually a show we did where we ended up having to do this, where we basically had like our hero camera on one Zoom call and a sub-switched like 3 other cameras around the room that were mostly like behind the shoulder shots and stuff. So if it's off by 200 milliseconds, who cares? But there was like a wide shot we would use from that we just wouldn't live on very long because there was a good chance when we went to that wide shot, lip sync was going to be out because we were having to do it off 2 different machines. With isolated audio, that all goes out the window. It doesn't matter because it's just a thing of like whether the 2 people have a little bit longer delay between their answer or whether they kind of step on each other a little bit. But we're not talking about large time fluctuations. Usually we're talking about just enough that lip sync would be uncomfortable. So isolated audio is a really huge thing. And again, that is coming with our NDI in Zoom Rooms.
So I think you kind of jumped on this a little bit, and I'll let maybe Kevin dive into that some more here. So James Hutchison, again, his second question he asked here is, I'd be interested to hear the team's thoughts on using Zoom for audio feedback from a Zoom meeting, think calls and responses. And I feel like you touched on that just a little bit. So Kevin, did you want to add anything to that portion about the NDI, about the audio portion of Zoom?
as far as like when you're producing a webinar and bringing it in as like a one-way feed, or
Yes.
so, and I'm not sure if I'm totally answering the question here, but what we talked about on Friday, and what we like to do is have basically a back channel communication, because webinars are one way essentially. Unless you go in and physically allow people to speak. But if you have people in a separate meeting that's a talent meeting, being fed to that webinar, there's no back and forth communication there. They don't get that direct feedback. So like we discussed on Friday, it's really about having some sort of Google Doc open where you've got a staff member typing up questions that they're seeing live populate and that kind of thing, using Slack or using chat, or any number of back channel communications.
Now that being said, you can obviously take your audio from the webinar back out, as long as it's coming from that same computer. So my computer that is my webinar capture, to where my program feed that we have in this webinar here is, that could also be bringing from its speaker channel to my audio mixer, my return audio from the webinar for any panelists that I had there, if I have a separate talent meeting versus my webinar, or attendees if I do allow to speak within there. And normally that's coming to my audio mixer and I'm doing a full mix minus. That being said, we have experimented with, on a small scale production, you have, my team is using a lot of ADA minis, right? So we have ADA mini, you've got a Zoom room using up inputs 1, 2, and 3 for my active speaker, my gallery, and my shared content coming from that meeting. That way we can switch back and forth between them. We designed this out with the original ADA mini back when we didn't have SuperSource. So anytime I needed to put multiple people on a screen, I was doing it with the native Zoom gallery view instead of both having to and being able to build those custom pips and windows. Very excited to be working on extremes now where we have that ability, or obviously if you're in vMix world, different category. And of course, going up to real switchers, different category. But but on the small scale, have that as a Zoom room, and then that's going out program USB capture to our webinar PC, and then come out of the webinar PC into, come into mic 2. And then you have mic 2. They both hit the mixer inside the ADAM. And then if we go ahead and give program alpha, our HDMI out, if we give program back to the Zoom room as well, so that our talent meeting can see the program as it's happening. They can see if we're rolling in, videos out of QLab or whatever we're doing, they can see and hear that. But if you mix the webinar return channel, which would have my attendee questions on it, with the Zoom room, which is bringing all of my talent to me, not even using an external mixer at all, just using the one built into the ADAM, which is a very straightforward, simple 2-track mixer. If you do that and send my program feed to both, Zoom's AEC will actually remove it. So the Zoom room side, it's not any different than having open air speakers to that mic. The Zoom room will actually use its AEC to remove the talent audio from them. So all they are left listening to is the webinar attendees. And the webinar side will remove the webinar attendees, so that all they're left is listening to the talent. Use this trick carefully. Test it out yourself. But we have had really good luck in simple really good results in simple setups, having AEC end up building our mix minus for us.
That's interesting, because we just worked on a big project using breakout rooms and having to get talkback between the breakout rooms so that the director could speak with stage A and stage B at any time, and the green room when necessary. It was a trick. We had to use separate buses in order to pull it off. I was using voice meter on 2 separate machines with 6 virtual machines running. So I had a separate virtual machine in each room that could capture the audio, and I could send the video through those buses wherever I needed to. The problem I ran into was the virtual machines didn't allow me to switch out audio sources like I wish I could. So one of the cool features Zoom has is that ability to select any sound or video source that you would like. Virtual machines don't necessarily give you that capability. They give you the system device or the built-in analog device. In my case, it was Ubuntu Studio that I was using as the virtual machine. But I was able to come in. Now, my question to you, and maybe anyone else, honestly, has anyone attempted yet, because that's what I want to do tonight, to record 6 virtual machines inside breakouts on units that are actually capable of recording. We're looking at doing ISO records that way, so that if we're in a 1080 meeting, we can run 6 virtual machines and record off 2 literal boxes and have those recordings for each of those breakout sessions at 1080p. It's a proof of concept that we have to kind of dig into and see if it'll actually function the way we want it to. But it's something we just experienced in concept last week.
Yeah, so you have a virtual machine or you have 6 virtual machines running on a box, connected up to 2 boxes, so 3 virtual machines per box. Each virtual machine is running 1 instance of Zoom, connected to a meeting. Same meeting, pinning individual
Same
participants
meeting.
and then doing a local recording.
Yeah, we just create alias emails so that we can use one email account, add an alias to the end so we know what email is being used to log into that account, and create separate accounts for each of those virtual machines to use. And then that gives us the capability to take that 1080 feed into NDI off of that virtual machine within the PC and take it wherever we want.
I don't see any reason it wouldn't work.
Oh, it'll work. It's just a matter of how.
Yeah, how well it'll work. It seems straightforward enough. There's also obviously the Zoom Rooms integration would be simpler. And then obviously if you're playing with the Zoom ISO beta, there's that as a method to get it out. I was actually talking to Andy earlier today about it in a little more detail.
Yeah, this is the poor man's solution, you might say, when it comes to using VirtualBox and free ISOs that you could obtain and put them on machines and get it up and running right away.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you could do right off the bat is there a reason not to go ahead and just run the Zoom client in dual screen mode so you're getting 2 off of each? Is that just a limitation on the virtual machines you're using?
It's actually more cumbersome because, like, with the setup I have 3 monitors for each machine. And in doing so, I create the first login on my main monitor on a single monitor login, and then I have 2 virtual machines running on the other 2. So I'm basically using single screen rather than dual monitor setups for this. Otherwise, it would cause chaos over the entire setup. I would have screens popping up all over the place. I added in one feature through Windows Pro, or it's actually Windows Pro Tools, or what do they call it? The Windows Power Toys. Allows you to split the screens into 4 sections or any size section and column that you want to. So adding that into the mix helped to maintain all the virtual machines at a pace that I could keep an eye on them and know where they were all located. But that was the only caveat to it.
So it sounds like let's test it, man. I would say if you haven't already played with the Zoom ISO beta, definitely play with that too, because he's doing some cool tricks to make that a lot easier. And obviously it's just in beta right now. It's not commercially available. Don't know what price it's going to look like, but yeah. I think I saw a question from Greg and Justin both. I think it was Greg and Justin.
Greg, did you have a question?
Yeah. Sorry. I had to find the mute button. Hey, Sam, it's great to have you and Kevin here. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciate being able to have some dialogue with Zoom finally, in this community. And I think it's kind of long overdue. And I really appreciate you guys taking time to come out. I actually had kind of 2 questions, and hopefully there may be short answers. And one, going back to the 1080 question, and those NDI ISOs, will they be able to support 1080? And then, now I forgot my second question. Is there something in the Zoom Room infrastructure that makes it more suitable for doing the NDI ISOs over? Is there some reason in the infrastructure of Zoom Rooms that you're not doing the NDI ISOs in the regular Zoom client?
So the answer to the 1080 question is yes, they will support 1080. So you'll be able to do however many feeds it ends up being. You'll be able to do that many at 1080. Again, assuming it's kind of come in as what's being sent. So the same as like go look in your desktop client today, see what's being received. If you got a camera set up where that's doing 1080, like if you brought me on there, I would only be giving you a 720 NDI. But if you bring Kevin's at 1080 right now because he's not doing a virtual background. So yes, short answer is yes, they will support 1080. As far as it being in Zoom Rooms versus Zoom client, one of the things we saw really early on in as everyone shifted to production was that Zoom Rooms fit a pretty neat niche because of how quick and easy to control it was. Now, this is pre-Zoom OSC. But pre-Zoom OSC, I had already kind of set on, man, Zoom Rooms is the way it's going. And I remember talking with Alex Lindsay about it. And right when he was building his studio out with his 16 Zoom Rooms, and he had kind of come to the same conclusion we had of like, it's very kind of like, it's as close to a device as you can get instead of being software on a computer. And did I full screen it? And did I move the mouse or what happened? So it's kind of a little cleaner. So from there, we start talking to the Zoom product team for Zoom Rooms, and we get NDI. Somewhere in the middle there, Zoom OSC popped up and became like, oh man, this is great. We can control everything exactly like we want to and kind of make it a really utility tool. And I've told my product teams, and I told Andy that like, they keep making me like bounce back and forth between which is better, because if I do this, I get this feature. And if I do that, I get that feature. And so that's kind of just where it is at the moment, and where it's come at the moment. But of course, looking at it, there's definitely, I mean, obviously we're seeing it with Zoom ISO. There is going to be a way to take that desktop client into NDI. And obviously we do see the need for it and how that's useful and where it could be applicable in the future.
If I could just follow up, like one thing that we found in when Microsoft Teams came out with NDI ISOs was that like we could get 1080 with a single feed. So if we just had one person and we're breaking out one person at into NDI, we could get them in 1080. But as soon as we added a second person, then we halved our resolution. So we went from 1080 to two 720s. And then if we added another person, we got two 720s and a 540. And then once we added a fourth person, then we just got 360 from there out. And so just hoping that that's not going to be, we're not going to drop down resolution every time we add somebody.
Yeah, that is not the case. I don't know how many feeds you'll be able to get out of a Zoom room, but however many feeds you'll be able to get could all be 1080. I know that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Leland.
Did I hear you correctly when you mentioned that unless someone has a virtual background, it'll come in at 1080? Does that restrict the resolution of a meeting when a virtual background is used by anyone?
Not of a meeting, but of a particular individual camera. If I turn on the Zoom virtual background, my camera gets limited to 720, but that does not affect the entire meeting.
That's interesting.
I was not aware of that.
I was going to come back to that because, Sam, you said you bounced around everybody's. If you pinned mine, what
You're
would you?
1080.
Right, and I am absolutely using a virtual background. I am not in that studio.
Sorry, and your virtual background with Zoom or with OBS?
With Zoom.
With Zoom. So then it may be a change. You are doing it with a green screen, though.
I am doing it with a green screen, yeah.
So with the green screen, it looks like we may have upped that so that the green screen can do 1080. I am doing it without a green screen. Which obviously you can see between like your lower shoulder, my hands, the difference in how the processing, where it decides to fall apart. But with virtual background, no green screen is where it is capped to 720.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
And also, you made a comment earlier about webinar and 1080 for attendees. And just to be clear, this is a webinar that has 1080p for attendees. So all of our attendees are actually seeing this in 1080 on the other side. I am monitoring the attendee side on one of my machines. And something to point out is if even if a panelist, even if I'm pushing, and what I am doing is pushing 1080 to all attendees all the time, but if a panelist doesn't have a 1080p camera, the attendees are only going to get the max resolution of that person's camera. So
correct.
So you know, as we were talking about that, I happened to look at the statistics and I saw that you had a 720 camera because I could see it both on the attendee side and here on the panelist side. So if anybody's been following along as we're talking about resolution and looking at statistics, those are some of the things that you might be seeing if you're on our webinar side. So
one of the things that I think is kind of a little bit of a change from where we traditionally were. Like traditionally in this industry, everything was like you needed scalers and you needed like, how many people remember bringing out your box to hook up to the projector? There was a big old switcher, like a Folsom, hooking up a big old Folsom just because, dang it, I'm in 29.97, I need to be in 30. Like, I remember those days. I don't miss those days. Zoom it's software, so it is kind of behaving differently within the computer and how those resolutions are going. And this also was brought up the other day with frame rates. and how the frame rate, like someone asked me, like, is it 2997 or is it 30? And I was like, it's 30, but it's variable frame rate. So it's like neither. Frame rate is another thing that you can watch in the statistics, and it's all going to be adapting based on the network. It's going to be doing the best it can for the experience based on the algorithm. It's going to play with latency. It's going to play with that frame rate. It's going to play with the resolution if it has to. And ultimately, if you have just a terrible network, it's going to get all the way down to where it's just trying to make audio happen because it knows that audio is the heart of the call, right? It's going to do whatever it can. But in the meantime, yeah, it's not going to upscale it in a technical sense. Like in that statistics window, I can take this window and I can blow it up all the way on my ultra wide monitor here. And it's never going to tell me I'm getting more than 1080 in video, even though my graphics card is rendering that over more pixels. So if you were to just go in this one and pin me up full screen active speaker, it would tell you you're getting 720 from me. And then it would take that and your graphics card would render it over more pixels. Or if you put up Ed or Kevin or Dave had it, Leland had it, they're all at 1080. Those would all be coming in, and it would tell you you're doing 1080, even though it's rendering it over, 2160 or whatever it's doing. Cool. Go ahead,
Now,
Greg. Oh, sorry, actually, Dave. Let's go. Dave.
Yeah, Dave had a question much earlier. Go ahead, Dave.
A couple questions. I'll try to be quick. What we do is we have lots of laptops, physical laptops and switchers and stuff. So we'll set up a meetings call, and then we'll set up a bunch of breakout rooms, and then do one-to-one physical laptop to a physical guest.
Yeah. And
now, are those calls, because they're two people in a breakout room, always going to be HD?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because you said it's point to point, and if there's only two people in a breakout room, so
yeah, because the breakout room at a technical level is almost its own meeting, just without a meeting ID. But if you look on the dashboard, it like reads you as, but if you look at the dashboard, it's one meeting ID with everybody in it. That's a really good question, and I don't have an answer. You would have to test it. Yeah. My ultimate answer / response would be get yourself whitelisted so you don't have to worry about that. But also to say, I love the breakout room. Using breakout rooms like that is definitely something near and dear to my heart, for like using the top level of your lobby as your catch-all green room, and then kind of filtering everyone in with all of your production calls down to the different breakouts, or having a machine that's able to just move between breakouts as you get to the different segments throughout your show. I love that.
Yeah, and then we can assign pips based on machine, not based on who. So right. if a machine goes down, we just move them to another breakout. They haven't dropped the call or anything like that.
Yep.
They're still in the meeting, and we have our isolated audio in and out. But another question I had, I just did Krispy Kreme's Investor Day, and another production company came in and banged their head on getting more than 360p for 3 days, and they finally called me, and I came in and said, and they had borrowed my portal to try to do it, and I came in and I said, you're looking at the attendee side. Yeah, you got to up it. And they called and they had upped it, but they hadn't specifically said attendees need to be upped
right
in their support request. And I thought that was interesting. I think it'd be a great feature request when you buy a webinar, because a lot of times you're just buying it for a month, or sometimes to buy a webinar license at a specific resolution. 500 people at 1080 or 500 people at 360, and that just be a price tier, and you just pay for it. And that's just my little extra grind, as opposed to spending $10,000 a month on 10 licenses you don't need if you just need that one webinar, twice a year. My other question, and I'm going to draw a blank on it. That may have been it. I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
so,
Dave.
I mean, my quick response to that is going to be, we've looked at it. I say I've put in my tidbits, but I'm not in sales and I'm not in product, but I've put my tidbit in for, like, I want webinars to all be in HD every time. It's a special add-on license. There's some things to be said there. That is way above my pay grade, but along the lines with that, in my opinion, there should not be a paywall between you and HD. You're doing events on Zoom. You're doing large scale webinars for high-end clients. It doesn't even have to be a lot of people. I don't care. Put that support ticket in. And if that's not going forward, have your customer or you do the contact sales thing and tell them you want to talk to event services and you want to get HD. That's not really what we do all day, but like there's the business and enterprise license category for it. We don't want you buying 10 licenses so you can get a business license so you can get the HD whitelist. You're doing big events. You want to do it off a pro license. Let's get you the flag. Let's get you where you need to be.
Yeah, I was there with the chief technology officer, Krispy Kreme, and he's calling, and he had to call some guy who was on vacation South America because that's the guy who had the account that could get tech support on the phone, because this was 30 hours before they went live, and they activated it 4 hours before they went live. They got the upgrade to 1080p, so they were really happy in the end, but it was a nail biter. I just remember my other question was, how do you guys determine when you're going to do something in-house or when you're going to deal with an outside production company? How do you ever get a call and say, this is above our pay grade, or not our pay grade, but our capability set, and we're going to outsource it? And then how do you choose what vendor you're going to recommend?
Yeah. So, as far as like customer events, when it comes in, what we've built ourselves for capability wise is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. We've built ourselves up with Ada Mini Extremes, and we're all switching from houses. Okay, we're switching from houses with home internet, which means anytime I put one on, I put another one on in another house, so that if house one goes down, hopefully house two doesn't at the same time, and we literally run them as a hot backup, both switching the show at the same time, one muted, and you just like spotlight the other one and go. And it works pretty well for us, but we're very real with the client about what we're doing and how we're doing it. That also means that it's tremendously resource intensive for us to do it that way versus being in a studio with bonded internet. It also means, because we're operating from homes, there's a limit to how much equipment we could even have there, how many calls we're going to do. If we're talking about merging, we will do a talent meeting, switch it, make it look cool, put it into a webinar. But if you need to have multiple guests coming in and out throughout, we need to do it across multiple meetings and that sort of setup, that we're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. We will absolutely consult on that with you. But I need an audio guy. I don't have we're all a one-man show here in each of our setups. So we're very real with ourselves. From that, customer gets up with us, they say, this is what I want to do. We say, great, that's that category. You're going to need a production company. We don't do a whole lot of referring production companies. We have a very small list of people that we just coincidentally have worked with, have hired people from, that sort of thing. But as a rule, I don't really have a referral list that I go to. I instead start asking that question. Hey, this is not the first year you've done this show. Who did you use in the past? You already have a relationship with a production company. Let's nurture that, because guess what? You know them, they know you. Let's keep that going. Unless you want to come to the table and tell me, man, my production company sucks and they're terrible and I never want to use them again. At which point, I actually had a call the other day where they basically told us that. And I went, okay, cool. I want to know the story, not because I care about the dirt on that company or whatever, but I want to make sure you're a good client. If you hated the last company, are you going to hate me too? I've played this game. I know.
So did you guys come from production backgrounds?
I was just about to say, a lot of us, well, nobody started at Zoom, right? I mean, Zoom hasn't been around long enough for any of us to have started only at Zoom. So, most of us have been in the event industry 10, 15 plus years, pushing cases and wrapping cables. I mean, we've done it, and we've made many contacts along the way. We know a lot of production houses, both locally, globally, nationwide, whatever. And so yeah, we've all been down the road,
And you just answered a post on Indeed or something and ended up inside Zoom.
Well, so I had in my presentation on Friday, I went really in depth into it. But yeah, I've been at Zoom for a little over 4 years now. And I'm one of the older ones within, actually, I might be the oldest one within this team, Zoom tenure wise. But my background is all lots of live sound, lots of theatrical design. That's my main background, was theatrical sound and lighting design, into corporate house of worship, bar bands. I did my cover bands year or two where I did bar band stuff. Glad I'm not doing that. that's where he found, like, actually Kevin worked with me over at a company here in Austin, doing corporate, back when. So as I started to form this team, I reached out to him and said, hey, you should go ahead and apply here. And the other ones we've hired, we have a guy in LA that's an old rigger. We have one in Amsterdam who got to do a show the other day on the virtual studio that he actually, when I interviewed him for the job, he was showing me pictures of the studio he designed. And then just last week, he got to do a really cool show on the studio. So yeah, we are all very heavy production backgrounds for my team.
I just want to jump in real quick, guys. We got about an hour left of the show. I want to get back to these questions to requests so we can get to the case study you brought to us, Sam. So, Chris, can I have you go off to the next question, and then we'll get back to the kind of scheduled program here. I don't want to get too far off topic. I love where we're going with this, but I do know you came with a specific purpose to us, and I don't want to end up being an entire Q&A and we miss what you brought to the table today.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So Chris, go on.
Yeah. Will Austin asks, would be interested to hear about the best practices of bringing Zoom presenters into vMix. I guess they're talking about bringing them from in Zoom and getting them into the vMix side of things, other than NDI, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, NDI is going to be your best practice. That's going to be where it's at for vMix. So it's coming to Zoom Rooms soon. Zoom ISO's in beta. Other than that, you're using either a Zoom desktop client or Zoom Rooms and doing a scan convert. Go ahead, Leland.
I just wanted to touch on one aspect we did initially when we first started doing these Zoom events. We took the screen layout that Zoom gives you at full resolution on a 1080p monitor, so it filled the screen completely, and then cut templates that would fit a 2-up, a 3-up, a 4-up, a 5-up, so that we knew exactly where those boxes were going to be, and then branded that template so that it didn't look like a Zoom, even though the boxes were where they normally would be. That was brought in as a screen scrape into vMix and then layered with that template in a simple input and then sent back out through the external virtual camera in vMix into a seat into another into another Zoom webinar.
Right. And that's one of my favorite ways to do it in its simplest form is just something like that. Like, cool, take a dual screen Zoom desktop client or Zoom Room and do exactly that. Have your active speaker on one, have your gallery on the other, make those frames to fit over your gallery view, and then just choose whether you want to switch. Do you want to see the active speaker full screen or do you want to see the gallery? I would much rather see you doing that than taking the gallery and doing the auto cropper thing and taking those 360 videos and scaling them up to 1080. Please don't do that. I love the software. I love the creativeness and the inventiveness, and like the developers are awesome. I love them, but please don't give me 360 upscaled.
And pretty much what Sam just described is basically what we're doing here without the overlay. So we have a dual window Zoom, and we're capturing gallery and active speaker. And for the audience at home, they can see that I'm just cutting between those two looks. So, Greg, real quick, and then I want to make sure we move on. Chris had the next question.
And I just wanted to ask about the ISOs, and the scaling is kind of what made me think of it. So with the ISOs, will they be clean screens? Will they have, like, how much, I call it screen debris, how much screen debris will there be on them?
NDI and Zoom Rooms will be clean outputs. Yeah, I've been fighting for that from day one, of saying it is only worth anything to me if it's completely clean, no icons whatsoever. Now it does come with a new icon on the Zoom Room side and the meeting side. You're going to get an NDI icon showing that NDI is happening because security team and legal love us, but not on the NDI outputs. It'll be clean.
Great.
That's
Chris,
awesome. Yeah. So the next question comes from Jason Gilly. His question is how do we as live stream producers using Zoom, lots of us are, best stay on top of new ways to use it and do things with it that people haven't seen before? Where is it that we go to learn those things like we are doing today?
You go to places like this. Yeah. So you come to places like this, you come to the test kitchen, you come to the office hours, and you learn from your peers. That being said, Zoom is also my team does exist, and we are committed to trying to keep some content coming out to you and to keep showing up in places like this to show you some new cool tricks that we come up with. There's also stuff like whatever you see Andy putting out, or I think you see Andy with ZoomOC putting out a lot of good stuff just because there's so much power behind that tool that you see people really get opening up their creative minds and seeing like what's possible. Like, oh man, doing chatbots. Like he called me today to talk about on Friday, we talked about like aggregating chat, and he reminded me like, yeah, you just put a ZoomOC client into each of the meetings and then have that all report back to have just pull all that chat out of it with the ZoomOC clients. And then you can start building chat bots and stuff like that within Isadora or within your code of choice that now can say like, hey, when someone raises their hand, you automatically send them a response to say, yeah, we'll get to your question in a second. Or when someone says the code word, you make them a panelist or send them to a breakout or whatever it may be.
And for learning opportunities, I can also say today I think is the day that I'm allowed to mention this is in July we have the first annual AV Tech Talk Summit coming up. So mark your calendars. That's going to be July 18, 19, and 20. And I know that there's going to be a session that has to do with Zoom and virtual production. So we'll have more schedule, more information coming out, and registration will be out soon. But that's another learning opportunity. And of course, if you join our Discord, the conversation between episodes continues over there. And I think every one of our panelists that I'm looking at tonight is a member on the Discord, as well as there's just so many other people who are part of our Discord and that can share that their knowledge with you. So yeah, join these communities and be active, and then tell us that there's things you want to see. If someone says to us, hey, I would love to have a workshop on, setting up my system so I can get NDI into my vMix. We'll call someone like Leland, who actually did a whole series on vMix, and we'll get him to come in again, and we'll put it together. We'll make it happen. So definitely just reach out, and we'll get that on the books for you. I saw Leo and Marty's hands up, so I'm going to go with Marty first, and then I'll go to Leo. That's all right.
Well,
that's just the order you guys are in on my gallery. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's a real treat to hear from you. I got two questions. First is last year at the annual event, there was a version of Zoom, a different subscription called On Zoom, which was meant to be an event platform. So what is the future of that, and will these features that we're talking about here with ISOs and such and NDI be included? And my second question is, what are the chances of getting an audio LUFS meter available?
So I'm going to answer the second question first and say that if that comes, it's going to come from Zoom apps. Someone said Zaps earlier. It's not Zaps anymore. It's Zoom apps now. But in Zoom apps, that's going to be where you get that. I don't know if I don't think that's possible in the current implementation of Zoom. Sorry, current. It's coming out next week. But I don't think that's quite possible at the moment. But that is definitely kind of the ilk of things that seem to be the future of that. This is from a very uneducated space here of what I know of how Zoom apps is going to work. But that's where your LUFS meter is going to come in. Now, the other question, you guys are really good. I had two things that I was able to share with you today that were roadmap. We already did NDI. Here's the second one. So OnZoom is still out, still a thing. OnZoom is not going anywhere. I mean, it's going places, but like it's not going away. OnZoom is the kind of prosumer side of events. So OnZoom is a public. One thing that I think confused a lot of people was thinking of OnZoom as a product, because it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. OnZoom does not change meetings or webinar. Inside OnZoom, you connect to a meeting or a webinar. What OnZoom is a way to do discovery, to do monetization, and to do ticketing. That is OnZoom. OnZoom is a public platform. You go to onzoom.com and you can say, I want to watch a magic show. You search for magic, and you're going to find a bunch of magic shows from different people, different times, and some of them will be free, some of them will be paid tickets. You can go there, whatever. It does all of your ticketing, it does your access control, it holds your ticket. It does it in a better way than a tighter way than Zoom registration does, because it is handling all that information. With on Zoom, it doesn't actually give the host your email address unless you explicitly give it to them. So there's also a data privacy thing that's a little handy sometimes for the consumer side of things. But it handles your ticket, and it does it in a better way because you have to be logged into on Zoom. I can't share that link with anyone. I can't get that link out and send it to someone else. It's doing the authentication itself. It's like a really good implementation of our external authentication feature, which we do have. And if you want to go through the work of building a platform and using SAML to tie back authentication to your platform with your login to allow people into your webinar, that's definitely the powerful way to do it, but it's obviously not super user friendly. You have to build it. OnZoom does all of that. So it's really, really great for ticketing, for monetization, for event discovery, having this marketplace. I want to go learn a cooking video tonight. I want to watch a concert. I want to do that. I want to go to a yoga class, that sort of thing. Perfect for that. Zoom events is something that is another kind of side project that our blog released very recently here. That is going live in late June. We don't have an exact date at this point, but late June, that's going to be going live. Or rather, I don't have a date to share. But late June, will go live. One big difference is that on Zoom is only available in the US at the moment. Zoom events will be launching globally, and it will be able to do paid events globally, with the exceptions of a couple of countries. It's like North Korea, Russia, stuff like that you can't do. There's like 8 countries or something. But other than that, it's available globally. You can have attendees globally. Zoom events is the corporate side of things. It is, I am Hooli, and I want to have my event hub where it's public facing, and all of the events that Hooli's going to host are going to be here available. And I use Hooli because that's what we use on our support page for our fictional company, so we don't give people's names. But that's my event hub where I put all the events I want to do, and it lets multiple people from within my org have kind of the publishing rights to be able to publish and manage those events, and makes them show up as Hooli is hosting this event instead of Kevin is hosting this event. So from there, again, you get back, and it's, once I join, it's meetings and it's webinar. So at the end of the day, all these new features we're talking about immersive scenes, we're talking about NDI, we're talking about all those things, that the latest and greatest is always available there because I'm just getting into a meeting or a webinar. Now, I am going to bunny trail on this just a bit to tell you about the other cool things about Zoom events versus on Zoom and other things you've seen. And that's how you manage sessions. So we have these hubs where I'm able to have my hub for Hooli. Right now with on Zoom, you can create single events. So I create an event, it's a meeting, it's on this day, this time, whatever. With Zoom events, I'm able to create a multi-session thing. And they're still working on what they're going to call the names for these, but I'm able to create a multi-session thing. So I could create basically like an event summit for the day and say that there's 4 different sessions, one from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1. 4 separate meetings or webinars that are tied together within this single ticketed event that people register for. And then they're able to see the different speakers, the descriptions for each of the things, all the things that you get within, an event platform. That's all here within that. So that's a type of event you're able to build. You're also able to build a multi-track one, which could be over multiple days and can have multiple simultaneous concurrent tracks. And that one actually, as you're building it, it's actually a CSV that you upload. So it's very in-depth from an event planning standpoint. What are all the options and all the things that I have within there? Go ahead, Leland.
Are you looking to incorporate CE credits into that type of system for those who obtain trainings in those types of methods? We have to deal with that with the Public Health Institute. A lot of the people come to these events so that they can earn the credits for continuing education. Is that something you guys have talked about for future possibilities?
I don't have anything to share on certification for it, but that is a common request.
Well, that would be certification, not for Zoom or for the process involved, but for the people attending the event
by a training event where the end result is I certify you came to all these things, you asked 3 questions per session, and there you go, your certificate. Yeah, it's a really common feature request, so it's on the radar, but I don't have anything to share roadmap for it.
Now, Sam, so I think one of the things I heard recently was that this year's Zoomtopia is going to be using the new platform. Is that correct?
That is correct. Zoomtopia will be on the Zoom Events platform completely. So everything we built last year with that big old website and all the integration, all that, thrown away, Zoom Events.
Are you still going to have some fun games during Zoomtopia that can land us some prizes? Because the Brio cam that I'm on right now actually came as a result of me completing a bunch of those things and getting a discount on the Brio. I was like, sure, why not? So
yeah, I'm not sure where they're at with gamification. I know gamification was a huge resource across like every event that I saw last year. Gamification is massive, so I know it's going to be considered by product. There are also I haven't been given anything I can say really defined about this, other than to say that the thing that is missing from virtual events right now is the networking portion of things. That's what's weak. And Zoom Events has some really great approaches to how it's going to try to make networking happen. The one that I can share is what's called the event lobby. And so that's basically, it's literally another Zoom window. Right now you have two Zoom windows, the one like the meeting / webinar, and then your like chat out of meeting phone main window. There's going to be a third Zoom window that you'll be able to open up for like, hey, I'm going to attend this multi-track event. And it can open, X many days before or after the event. And that gets me in, and it gets me a out of meeting chat experience. So the real full Zoom chat experience with full emoticons and file sharing and all sorts of stuff. It gets me the full chat experience in a moderated way, along with like just a bunch of different content and things to allow the community to start kind of hyping up to the event before the event, and then all the way through the event. And that's actually how you get between your different sessions throughout your day. Is they're all showing up there. So basically everything you saw on zoomtopia.com, that's all built into that event lobby once you actually get into the Zoom Events platform.
That's great.
I just got to go to Leo because I feel like he's had his hand up just forever here.
Sure.
It's all right. It's okay. I can actually rest my hand on my table, so I'm not actually that tired from it. This is you've answered about 5 questions that I was thinking about, but what you've actually opened up there, Sam, in a completely different way is the breakout rooms. And the whole thing of that, when you're running an event that's in Zoom and you're trying to run an event where you've got breakout rooms and the list is in a completely different format than the participants, and then you're talking about what you've just talked about, moving people between sessions, moving people between things. How are there any tricks that you yourself see at the moment, or that you'll see that this events will enable?
Well, so I mean, one of the things that it enables is completely rethinking how you're doing that. Right now, a lot of the time it's being used for, I want to have this event all day where we do our breakout tracks. And you think of like when I went to the Marriott for my conference, I would go to the general session at the beginning of the day, and then I have my breakout rooms down the hall, and I go there. And that's what people use breakout rooms for. That's not what the breakout rooms feature is good at. The breakout rooms feature is good at, once you're in within one of those sessions, you're in a smaller group, and you now break in from your room of 100, you break down into your groups of 5 and actually have a discussion. That's what the breakout rooms feature is great at, is like, hey, let's just get into groups of 5, brainstorm, come back, report your findings. So I think the big change that Zoom Events brings is when I'm going down the hall to get to my next room for my next session, that's another session. That's me hitting leave webinar from the keynote, and I'm bam, that third Zoom window is open in front of me with the event lobby, where I'm chatting with everybody saying like, man, that was a great keynote opening session today. What do I have next? I look at my schedule. I see the next session that I registered for on track 2 on the tech track, and I click to start that one. And now all those links, I'm not going back to my email to find like, well, what's the next session I did? I'm not going back to my Google Calendar. I'm staying within the Zoom app. What am I registered for as an event attendee? It is a event platform. It is an event portal. So that change, I think, is pretty massive in how you try to organize these things.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that we have, because the minute we start issuing out loads of Zoom links, we know that the minute we stop on one thing, and we just lose half the attendees just walk away because they just can't find the right link, and it takes too long, and the flow is lost. And so we tried to get around that by putting it into breakout rooms. But when you're sitting there faced with 250 people plus to try and shift into breakout rooms, it's just
nightmarish. That's nightmarish.
It's just horrible. It's just a horrible experience. So however you do it, there's no quick way.
Right. Exactly. Dave?
So you're saying we can go from webinar and break people into multiple webinars? Because that's been something that I've been faced with and not been able to do.
Well, so in this case, it's not breaking them into. It's more of when I went to super cool event. I went to go register for super cool events, and it ultimately took me to Hooli's event hub on Zoom Events platform. That's where it's basically the front end of the site. I registered for the event, I bought my ticket, and then I registered for my sessions. And I said, I want to go to the opening keynote, and then I want to go to the analyst track, and I'm going to register for this session next. And that could be a webinar, yeah. But it's not the keynote ends and I hit go and everyone pushes to their webinars. It's the keynote ends, I close that, and everyone is back looking at the lobby on that other Zoom window where
we can't set up a list where all the employees that are supposed to be in this segment of the company go to their department meeting and these go to their department meeting.
I don't have any specifics as far as how you could force ticketing like that, but I'm sure it will be a consideration because that's definitely a need of like, we're the first event that happened. I think it's going to be the first really, that's not true because it's launching in late June, but the first big event that I think I'm going to run on it internally is our Zoom Growth Summit, which is our sales kickoff. And that one, we need exactly that. We need to be able to take this vertical and have this list of names, get registered for this session. So I have to imagine that our product team is going to be looking at like, not only how do we let everyone register and pick their sessions, but how do we assign sessions to them?
Yeah. Real quick aside, so you can jump into your case study. Apple in iOS can correct your eyeballs so that they're always looking at the camera. Is Zoom considering that?
As far as like attention tracking,
as far as correcting visually to raise people when they're looking down at the monitor or up at their monitor, it corrects their eyeballs. So they always look like they're looking at you.
Like when Jack Sparrow painted other eyeballs on his closed eyelids?
You know, I mean, you have the filters where you can like supplement your eyelashes or your eyebrows. So it seems like it's just a matter of them building the filter.
Apple does it. It's in every iPhone.
Yeah. Now. I have not seen that or heard of that.
So real quick though,
school kids would love that.
Yeah, they would.
So sure, Dave, I was paying attention. Check the recording. My eyes were looking right at the camera.
So Dave, real quick, what you were asking, Dave, is if there is a way that when you log into a Zoom, it automatically logs you into your own session, like your own breakout room that you're supposed to go into for a specific meeting. Because there is a way to do that. If you have breakout rooms and you have a pre-registration list, you can go in on the back end and tell it, these emails need to go to this breakout room when it opens. These emails go to that breakout room when it opens.
Yeah, we did something like that with a law firm where the partners had to discuss compensation after the main meeting. So right at the end of the meeting, boom, it split everyone who was allowed to be in that discussion and who wasn't. The problem was a couple of people didn't log in with their right email address. So there's some guy back in the back scrambling and he couldn't get them all moved right. And it was a meeting now and not a webinar. So then they're all talking versus being a one-way thing.
Oh, okay. All right. I was like, wait a minute, there's already a feature. That's what I was trying to get at, is making sure there wasn't something extra you were trying to get out of it. Cause I'm like, there's already that feature as long as you have the list. But I get what you're saying. If they don't log in with their name, then you're kind of, if with that email that's attached, then you're kind of screwed on that. Cause we had to do that with an event that we had over 240 people log in. We had their emails all set up to go into their own 9 breakout rooms or whatever it was. And there was a couple of people that didn't log in through the email that they registered with. So we had to go through and go, oh, what's your name? Oh, okay. So what we did is before we went to the breakout rooms, we made an announcement basically to them saying, make sure your name matches your registration that you registered with the event with. And they put a little cue card up on the screen that said their name with a number, and it made them put the breakout room number. They made them put the breakout room number, then their name after it. So that way, anybody who was unfiltered, we just went through and went 1 1 1 1 1 2 2 2 2 3 3 3 3 and kicked them all where they needed to go.
That's genius.
This is the 2021, like the 2021 event producer version of the nightmare where you go to school without your pants. Like, breakout registration.
Putting numbers in their names is the fastest and easiest way. That's the way we've done it. And also the problem you have that is if you have multiple breakout rooms during a thing, you can't do the pre-register, and it only works for 200 anyway.
So we have a lot of questions still left, but I want to make sure, Sam, that we get to see that case study that you brought. So I would love to, if you can go through that, and then that might even answer some of the questions that we have lined up, if they get to see how you guys do some of these events and some of the cool stuff you've done. And then we will lightning round as many of the questions as we can to get us to the end of the hour after we get through the case study. So if everybody can just for a few minutes hold those questions, let's give Sam the floor to show us some of the stuff they've done, and then we'll try to get through as many as we can before the end of the hour. So Sam, tell us about what you got.
Cool. So I've got my screen share going here. Just want to make sure that you're able to get it where you need it.
Yep.
Sweet.
Yes.
So yeah, we did a show recently, and some of this stuff, this has some elements that are solid and people are doing, and some things that I think are truly new. But ultimately, what we ended up doing was we did this show. This was switched on an ATA Mini Extreme here in Austin, Texas. We had the two people sit down for an interview. We were able to switch between multiple camera angles. We were able to put some lower thirds, some bugs, switch between B-roll, all the usual stuff that you expect from a multi-camera interview, fireside chat. The only trick was one was in New York, one was in Sydney, and we were switching it in Austin. And we did that all completely with Zoom. So what we ended up doing was we had multiple cameras in each location. New York was in an Airbnb there where they had lit him. You see that up on the top left. Sydney was on a green screen studio. We see on the top right. We composited that together. The big trick was kind of how we had them interacting. And if you heard me kind of ranting earlier about like the time delays of trying to get multiple computers within one call inside the same time sync and getting lip sync on them, that's always a really big struggle. So for them to get that eye line between each other, we actually put a D10, D7 on a cart in front of them. They were on in-ears with that, and then just the built-in mic, built-in camera. So that's how they're seeing and hearing each other, just having that conversation completely separate from production. Production's not even involved in that. They're talking to each other. And then what we actually ended up doing to get their cameras, because if I take this camera and this camera, my wide shot and my close of each of these guys, and I put them each on a Zoom call on a different computer, or even two computers and then one call, I'm going to have to use audio from one of them. And if I use the video from both of them, then one will be in sync, one will be out of sync. And obviously with both of these shots, lip sync would be pretty bad if it's out. You're going to tell. It's not like it's a wide shot. It's not behind their shoulder or anything like that. So we actually ended up compositing the two camera angles into a single 16:9 image, which is what we would feed over Zoom. So we took both those shots, cropped them down to the minimum size we could afford, and then sent that. So we actually ended up happening on our ATA Mini Extreme here. We had inputs 1 and 2 were from a single meeting connected up with Zoom OSC, pinning each of those two participants, one from New York, one from Sydney. They have those cameras composited. And what we would do is during rehearsals, we actually went in and grabbed all of our back plates into our media players to do our keys. One of the things that ended up being really interesting about that is like this shot, even if you think about how that key works, even this shot here is actually cut off here and somewhere around here. It's actually not there. That's where you see the visible line. That's actually just a line in the wall. It's actually damn near invisible where the actual crop happened. But we ended up having to, even in some of this, like the simplest of shots, you end up having to re-key in the backgrounds and composite it. But by doing that, we were able to get, I think, what ended up being a neat reveal and a sort of different approach. I've seen people do it. I've seen people do it with large scale production using SRT or something as their transport. And I've seen lots of people do it in post, obviously, but this was our first time getting to do it all via Zoom. With that, I do have some drawings that are probably too small to really be able to tell. So I'm going to kind of just blow past them and let us open back up to some more Q&A, start that lightning round, because I think that's ultimately the point I'm getting at is we did this with the composite and that ended up being pretty fun. We're actually doing that again next month. We're doing the next episode of that series. And this time to step it up, we're going to have some more live interaction with guests coming in on a physical display. And then I think we're actually going to be doing both of them on green screen so that we can change the physical set throughout the night. Though I'm less excited about that because while the ATEM Mini Extreme is pretty amazing for what it'll do for $1,000, the keying is not the best I've ever seen. I'm happy with the results, all things considered, but it was nice to be able to cut to my wide shot or to cut to my shot of Gary where I had a physical background, so I'm not having to just sit on a bad key the whole night.
What's amazing to me, though, to hear is that you guys were using ATEM Mini Extremes and products that a number of our audience have. They already, have these things, and it's just it's great to hear that that's what you guys are using. So anybody who's out there is thinking, man, I just don't have the gear to pull stuff off. You actually do. You have the same gear that a lot of us are using for these types of productions. So that was very cool to hear about, and a very cool little case study that you guys did. I wish we would have spent more time. I know I got the kind of full presentation of it the other day on the Zoom Test Kitchen. So if you're on Facebook and you want to go find Zoom Test Kitchen, join that group, and you'll be able to get to the recording of that further case study that Sam had gone a little more in depth with. Leland, real quick, because we're going to jump into a ton of questions.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with the first question, I guess. I was just curious, that composite image that you sent over, could you just rehash again why that was purposeful? Because I was still sucking in a lot of the other stuff that you guys managed to pull off in that broadcast, and I got to give you a kudos for what you did accomplish there. What was the true purpose of that dual photo composite for the talent?
So ultimately, my problem is that I can only have a single camera coming up from my source. I can only have a single camera because I only get a single audio.
Oh, I see what you're doing.
Without that, the two of them would be leaking out of sync.
Okay.
And we actually, early on, we had planned on actually having them use ATEM Minis also and using Streamweaver to tunnel our OSC over the network and try to reliably switch them to the other camera at the same time as I switch the background. And I'm glad my guys talked me out of that because it was never going to work. I had enough hell just fighting with the ATEM Mini macros as they were to try to not have glitches in our switches as we switch the super source.
Thanks.
Could you not have just used audio follow video and had both cameras join the meeting?
So sort of, because then you would be in sync all the time. Our problem is while Zoom, if you sit two computers listening to the same call next to each other, most of the time it's going to be pretty close. I've actually had times where I've sat backstage back when we were in physical ballrooms. I would sit backstage with my Zoom computer with my attendee view, and it was just a slight double image off of my hotspot. I could listen to it. It wasn't even bugging me based off the bounce off the back wall took longer than getting to the data center and back. But every now and then something happens with my network, even hardwired, and all of a sudden I'm a half second out. So now if I do audio follow video, that half second, I got a word twice. Or I get a pop or a click or something longer. So that's why I haven't gone that one. That's in my head why I've never tried it. I also didn't try doing the mix minus in the ATEM for a long time because I was like, no, you shouldn't do that. You have to have a mix minus. Before I was like, well, what's the difference between this and speakers and a mic? AEC's doing it. And turns out AEC's doing it. Every now and then I'm amazed at modern technology. So it's definitely something at some point I need to play with to see if audio follow video is useful. The problem is at some point it's going to bite me.
Well, and the bigger ATEMs do mix minus on the B and C outs. It's kind of cool.
We have a 2ME that we got the 2ME for our big rig here and then shelved it as soon as the Extreme came out because it wasn't worth all the SDI converters.
Ask really quickly on this. You've done everything on the ATEM Minis, and I know that a lot of us are also using things like vMix. Have you tried to do any of this on vMix on AWS?
No, I haven't played. I haven't played with AWS enough. I also haven't played with vMix enough. As we got ready to start spinning up all the studios, we got past concept with. I actually had an Ada Mini because I was just testing it as a capture card when it first launched, and then we started developing shows on it. And then from there, as we went to buy everything, I did have a very real argument with myself overnight of like, am I going vMix? Am I going 2MEs? What am I doing? vMix does so much more, but it's software and I'm still scared of software. And ultimately I decided that for the price point, even at the 2ME stage where we were talking about $3,000 for a switcher with SuperSource, at the price point, it wasn't worth the software route to me for what we needed. I regret that every now and
then. So to start our quick questions, I just want to actually go back. Earlier, Ray Harris had asked here in the webinar, is there a way to prevent active speaker from showing during a webinar when not in full screen? I've tried all the things I can think of and still see active speaker, even if it's just the name with no video on. Now, you guys had gone and answered that, but because not everybody is in the webinar, we have people watching on Facebook and on YouTube. The answer was to select attendees, follow host view, and go to the gallery so they'll see the gallery. Or within the webinar, there's always video shown for the active speaker, either their video or profile image name. I can say the way I handle this is I do a lot of Zoom management for other people's large scale events that are all produced in Zoom. And a lot of times as the host who's using Zoom OSC or whatever it is, I will take my camera, I'll block it out, and I'll make my virtual background the logo for the conference. And whenever there's a screen share that happens, I also spotlight that logo so that you get and put it in side-by-side view for the attendees to see it. And then you get a branded experience right next to your, assuming that it's not somebody talking to slides, if it's like video playback or something like that that's being done as a screen share or an opening slide loop, I'll throw that there. So that's one trick to try to get through that. We also had one that got asked, a couple that got asked and answered here. Just let me see if there's any that we had to get to that maybe were missed. Frank Henny here in the webinar had asked, what are the preferred settings for a video you want to play back using the built-in video playback tool in screen sharing? I want to encode the video ahead of time to make it optimal. Sam, do you want to answer that? You answered it in the...
So in my opinion, you're going to go 1080, 30 frames, 1080p. That's going to be the best that Zoom's going to send. That's actually not quite true for screen share, but that's what you should do for the file sharing feature. The only thing is, I'm trying to remember, Kevin might remember, when my team when the feature first came out, my team like made me a huge grid of like, we tried every encoding method known to man and what worked and didn't. And the only one that really had any issues was 1080, 30 with, I want to say they encoded it at like 100 megabit. And surprise, that didn't love it. That had some lag issues, but everything else, like I think the next step down was 20 megabit was fine. So put a little bit of compression on it, H.264, MP4, 1080, 30, it's golden.
That's the key. So when it first came out, I remember on the Zoom test kitchen, we did a lot of testing with it, and there was no documentation of what codecs it supported other than it said the wrappers of MP4 or MOV.
Right.
And we were finding an H.264 as a .mov actually worked more reliably than an MP4. And yeah, that was kind of the deal. Now, because it does the optimize for video, and when you launch the video player for screen sharing and ticks the share computer audio, we also found that it was always knocking it down to 720, even if it was a 1080p video. So I tend to often just do 720 30 videos just because it's gonna, instead of throwing away that data and risking the bandwidth, that's kind of where I am. But 1080p is absolutely works too. It's just like I said, once you check that optimize button, the most you're really going to kind of get out of it is the 720, unless you have one of those 1080p accounts like we have, which we've actually, strangely enough, Jeff I think could attest to this in the test kitchen, have gotten some of those videos to play 1080p without, when we actually manually uncheck the optimize for video. And to our surprise, we were shocked. But with that level account, and of course, you know, when we're doing that, we're both Jeff and I are on gigabit connections with fiber, and you know, and have these high level accounts. But it has been possible, but it's not what I'm seeing as the typical. I'm seeing that it knocks it mostly down to 720. I saw Leland's hand and then Dave's hand, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, one thing we've discovered about video playback inside Zoom or any real online system that you're going to broadcast to is that if you're using lossless video, which is going to be the highest size file that you're going to possibly come against, is actually easier to stream because it's not compressing and uncompressing the video content as it goes across the internet. The other problem with that is if you compress video and you use large bit rates for the video bit rate, it's causing a much more overhead to your bandwidth than what you're going to want to deal with. If you're going to send compressed video, make it smaller bit rates. We tend to use 5 megabit bit rates when we use MP4s, and we don't have any problem with those. So try to avoid the higher bit rates on the compressed files.
So one thing I'll say to that real quick on the file share, the advanced video file share feature specifically within share screen, the video file share, not sharing screen, they behave very differently. So the optimized video checkbox basically tells Zoom use a different algorithm. So it says, which am I prioritizing? Do I care about clarity and resolution, or do I care about motion? And then there's also the additional camera processing that it does, where it says, I really care about motion. I want it to be as smooth as I possibly can. Resolution be damned. I'll do as best as I can. So you have like those 3 different ways that Zoom can optimize video, which is why you would want to screen share certain content versus bring it in as a camera channel. Camera channel is going to have really good motion. Screen shared content is going to be incredibly well compressed for bandwidth. And especially if you're doing like PowerPoint slides, like, man, it works some magic to it as far as what it actually takes. The video file share, it's actually sending the file, not the video in a way. So it actually does matter. And this is the one place where I might make the argument that you want some compression as opposed to lossless, in my opinion. Whereas normally, like from an editing standpoint, I'm absolutely with you of like uncompressed video can play back less because my CPU is not having to unpack it to then deal with it. But in this case, it's actually sending the file over that. And then I
get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's ultimately playing on a player on everyone's Zoom client linked together by time, which is also why that feature is just so dang cool. Is because like the quality you can achieve on that will surpass any other quality you can get over video, because it's the closest thing that Zoom has to buffering. It's not buffering, but it's the closest thing we have to it because we're so much about real time. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely good to know. Thanks.
Dave, go ahead.
While we're in the advanced screen share, have you guys used, I just did something where we had screens and we had 3 cameras, and I used the A10 Mini Extreme for the very first time, and I used the USB-C out for my camera switch, but then the screen feed, I split the one of the HDMIs as an aux, and I fed that into another input on the Zoom machine as the second camera, and used that because the PowerPoint was on the screens anyway and they tracked, but I didn't have any idea what the resolution, frame rate, luckily it was just PowerPoint slides, but that's the first time I'd used it.
Yeah. So when you're sharing content from a second camera, it is going down the content channel and it is treating it with the content algorithms, not the camera algorithms. So it is optimizing it a little bit that direction. It's just doing it through a capture card instead of a screen capture of a window. I'm not able to dig into much more specifics than that without the setup, other than to say that's where the statistics window is your friend. Because it'll show you both the video, but it also show you the screen share. You can look at what am I sending from screen sharing, what's my frame rate and my resolution, to try to see how it's handling that, as well as on the screen share, Kevin, do you get, I clicked the wrong button. There we go, video back. I clicked the button instead of the up arrow. Kevin, with the screen share, do you get the bit depth there or just in the dashboard? Just the dashboard. So it'll show you the frame rate, the resolution, it'll show you your latency, jitter, packet loss, all that. If you go in the dashboard, if you have an account that has dashboard access, you can actually see the bit depth or the bit rate itself.
So if I was working for, say, financial services or banking, and all their PowerPoint slides are brutal, and I just wanted to go in with the output of my switcher with their crazy Excel sheets, but all my my content, my camera shots were going to be small, could I just do the whole thing as a screen share into that second camera and display their PowerPoints in all their glory with a little tiny window of them in the corner, and that be my production input versus the camera input?
So yeah, if you're doing banking, I definitely would use the screen share content window, the screen share for your content, because yeah, those numbers are just brutal, and the way it handles it, particularly towards mobile and particularly towards low bandwidth users, is going to be like so far superior. But I would probably not mix my pip of my camera into it, because I'm either checking optimize for video, where my numbers are going to go to hell in favor of that video looking kind of okay, or that video is going to be like 7 frames a second. Like it's not going to
max headroom. Like,
and also as long as that video is moving, Zoom's going to be looking at it saying, hey, this image is changing. I should update. I should try to do this, which is going to trash your bandwidth usage comparatively. Versus if it's a slide, if you keep motion off of that slide and let it just be a slide, Zoom will end up giving you a really super crisp image because of the way it's able to compress it.
So it's not a cheat to get 720.
I wouldn't use that as an HD cheat. I saw someone doing it the other day.
Yeah.
Actually, they put a post about that. And actually, he got 1080/30 on it. But I'm going to go back to same thing I said earlier. Support ticket, get yourself the whitelist. We want to give it to you the right way. Let's get it to you the right way so that you're not having to do tricks. We want you to have all the tools in your arsenal.
Leland, quickly, because we're going to move on.
Just to help Dave out a little bit, what we did in our last event, Dave, was we had a separate breakout room just for slides. One person running their slide as a screen share. They did all the controls except for the talent running the pickle, and that was it. Worked really well.
I'll go out of order real quick. Frank Kenny, just because we were talking about the video screen share tool, asked here in Zoom if there's any chance for a playlist feature in the video screen share tool, which I think would be neat.
I don't know of anything yet. For roadmap, I will just say that we've noticed that and kind of tossed that to product as well, that like going between multiples can be a little rough. I will say that remember that you can start a new, or you can get going on starting a new share before you actually kind of take over, and you can take over one share into the next. It's not fun. You got to practice it. There's room for improvement, but
I find that I was going to say the same thing. You can do new share and get ready and have your file up, selected in the browser window when it pops up. I'll actually even say when you do a video share, sometimes it takes a little time to ramp up if you're coming from not sharing at all. So oftentimes I will build in a holding slide that's part of just a regular screen share, and then bring in the video share, and it ticks right away as soon as you hit it. And then I also get in the habit of hitting, this was a Jeff Widgren tip, as soon as you hit share, pick the file, hit OK or whatever it is, and then hit spacebar to get it to play. If you've done that from within a previous share, it's a much smoother transition, and you don't have as much ramp up for the frame rate to get up to the 30 frames. It pretty much hits right away. So as you can tell, we've done a lot of our own internal testing for things like these. So great. Moving on, Greg Gibson, I think we kind of answered this earlier. What happens if you're forcing 1080p on all attendees in a webinar and the attendee can't support that resolution?
Yeah, so if the attendee can't support it, then they're going to get whatever they can. They're going to get the best that they can. Zoom's going to constantly be evaluating that. So if they have a network hit, that one attendee's experience will drop, and then it'll come back up as high as it possibly can. The only time, and this is kind of what it leads to, is like, when would I not want to force 1080p on users? The only time that it really, in my opinion, can be a detriment is if I have like, I've had it with some banking institutions and stuff where they say like, look, we have all 1,000 of our employees are going to be watching this session on their individual computers from one location. And while our network can handle any one of them doing it, we can't handle all 1,000 doing it. And in that case, it's going to degrade for everybody all at the same time. So I have had certain institutions where we've said, like, nope, we're going to limit it to 720, or we're just not going to do it in HD. And instead, we're going to have to use screen sharing to make sure that we can see those slides clearly without having a high res video file going for our full mixed program. Other than that, if you're not really worried about like a particular geo just getting overloaded, or a particular physical location, something like an office, then it's down to each attendee is going to get the best that they can get.
Great. Omar, I think there's a couple questions you got in the queue.
Yeah, so lightning round in this, right? So the next one I got is from Jason. He says, I'm curious in particular about the best practices on the recording side as it relates to getting the best recording possible.
Yeah. So use that statistics window. Do all the HD things we talked about. Look at that statistics window. Make sure you have HD before you hit record. When you hit record, it's going to create a file. It's going to create a file at the file size that it thinks it needs. If there's no attendee right now who can give HD because no one checked the box or whatever, or we're limited, then it's not going to create it. And even if someone joins later who has a 1080p camera, it's not going to step it up because it already has a file that it's trying to write. It can't change it mid scene. So make sure you're looking at good HD content before you hit record. From there, if you're cloud recording, there's a checkbox in there. Record separately, active speaker, gallery view, content. Hit all those checkboxes, record all those different things, hand that to your editor, let them do their magic in post. If you want B-roll or ISOs of individual people, you pin them, you local record those people full screen. Use that statistics window, make sure you're getting your 720 or your 1080 when you local record. Make sure in your recording settings you have timestamps turned off. I hate timestamps on my Zoom recordings. Editor's bane, because now they have to zoom it in. Now their person's not centered right and their headroom is all cut off weird. Other thing is, if you're going to have people local recording, don't let them be co-host. Make them just normal participants of the meeting, because the co-host controls the cloud recording. So you can end up with some weird things that are either confusing or concerning. Like right now, if I look at the session, all of my hosts and co-hosts have a cloud recording icon next to them. I don't know if one of them's local recording. They could be. The cloud recording icon steps over the other one. They also, right now, if they were local recording, couldn't stop their local recording because they would actually stop the cloud recording. So make sure your local record people are not co-hosts. They just need to be regular people. There's my lightning answer.
That's interesting. Just not to go too far out. I always do local records and cloud records when I can, because local records give you the option to have individual audio files that you don't get in the cloud. So there's advantages to each, and the ability to get a somewhat customized view. And maybe this is because I do a lot of these recordings where I'm recording from two machines that I'm physically touching. But I found that I usually make my local record a co-host. I have to start that local recording before I start the cloud recording. Otherwise, I can't start the cloud recording as a co-host because, sorry, I couldn't start the local recording because, as you said, that would change the cloud recording. But certain things like spotlighting, I'm able to maintain my pins through spotlighting from the host machine that I wouldn't be able to if I was a participant who was given permission to record. So there's certain caveats and tricks, and believe me, that was a long, painstaking process. Well, actually, it was more of an accident, but then figuring out why it happened and recreating it was the long, painstaking part. But so it is quirky. One of the things that actually I wish if I could make a feature request would be a new recording option specifically just for webinar that only records the attendees' view of the session, because there is no real view that does that per se. It could be because you could be following host view or not following host view, and if I'm doing a cloud or a local record, I never get exactly the only thing that the attendee saw, unless I am an attendee and I do a screen scrape. So my clients often, I just did a whole conference that was, a whole month long, and that was the bane of my existence, was cutting the show in a way that was going to give them the recording view they wanted based on, what they wanted on the attendees were seeing on screen. I was using Zoom ISO and like trying to bring people up in the blind. Like I have somebody spotlighted, turn on the cameras of the other people. Now they've come on screen in the gallery view beforehand, and that I can't use that recording now, and there's all sorts of things that made it tough because they were trying not to edit it. So having a view of the webinar attendees view would be a really great thing, I think. So and I'm not the only person I've talked to who, well, not that I talk to myself very often, but that has asked for that kind of thing. So Omar or Chris, do you have the next question?
Yes, I do. Evan Jonathan Brunellis would like to know how to prevent pinned video on second display from changing when presentation is shared.
Yeah, so
I'm not aware of any way to do it.
Yeah, I don't think I have a way either. That's where, to me, if I'm using computers for production, that's the tick box of whether we're using desktop versus rooms. And if we go to switch to using rooms for our production, it does mean that we lose Zoom OSC. So we lose a lot of our remote control abilities, and that's a pain point right now. But anytime we have content, especially if we have content changing throughout, like I basically consider if you have content going on, you don't have a dual screen Zoom desktop option anymore. So if I have content, I go to Zoom Rooms where I have my triple screen option. There it's different. It's not clean screens there. The recording icon's going to show up. The people number icon shows up. The name shows up. Some of those things. So there are still some caveats of like how I need to go about this if I'm just cutting them off in my SuperSource or in my layouts in vMix. But ultimately, that's the decision that ended up triggering me to go. I'm using Zoom Rooms for this production.
And Greg, what's the magic number for cutting the screen debris on the? Is it 107%? 105?
It like for Zoom Rooms for me, it's a little bit different. So typically it's about 105 to 107 on a typical Zoom meeting, and in a Zoom room, I typically do 10%.
Okay, got it. I knew there was some number that you had figured out over painstaking things.
That one will actually change based on whether you're in 1080 or 4K. And I'm going to run all my screens in 1080, but changing the system resolution actually changes the font on Zoom Rooms.
And one thing that I've noticed is and so sometimes I do run it on a 4K monitor and sometimes on a 2560 1440. And I do notice that the icons and the fonts are different sizes.
Yep. Yeah. So that'll follow across. That is why in my head, I just lock everything at we are running at 1080. We are running all of our screens at 1080. That my video is not going to be better than that anyway. It also, it can kind of, especially if you're running like a triple screen Zoom room, it can kind of trash your CPU a little bit if you're running on 4K monitors, because that will affect it.
I can just touch on, if you are stuck using dual monitor, if you don't have a Zoom room, what I have done is I will still always use dual monitor if there's going to be a screen share, but I only pin on all of my computers on the first screen and then crop to that. And I leave the second screen as useless. I keep it up because I don't want my capture to end up having a side-by-side view. I still want cleans of all of my people, or full screens of all of my presenters. So it takes double the machines you think you're going to need, if you were used to pinning on two screens, pinning on the main screen and the secondary screen. So that's kind of been my workaround for doing that with regular Zoom meetings using dual screen setups. Chris, do you have the next question?
Yeah, the next question is from Brent Chandler. He asked, any timeline on breakout rooms and webinar? And with that, is there any in the future coming to highlight feature in breakout rooms?
And those are two different questions. One was from Brent Chandler, and the other one was from Li Hong Hui.
I don't understand the highlight question. What was that one again?
I'm assuming like a spotlight feature in breakout rooms is what they're asking for.
Gotcha. The answer to both is I don't have an answer. Breakouts are coming to webinar, but I don't have a timeline.
Great. That's a valid answer. We would, but you can, if anyone is putting like check marks or ticks and lines of people who want it, there's 13 people in this meeting. Well, I guess only 11 counting you two, plus about 1,000 people watching. So we'll put that down as 1,011. if we could upvote that. So AV Trainer has a bunch of questions here that I would love to kind of decode because they're long. Maybe I'll sort through these for a minute. Omar, do you want to go to that next question that you have while I look through some of these?
Yeah, that's not a problem. So let me actually just get ahead of it here for a second. I see these coming up here. So this is more of a question from, again, Lee Hong Hu. He's saying, we encountered a major problem whereby the webinar embedded onto the website is not at 1080p, despite the fact that we have business plan and have a 1080p activated by the tech support. The end conclusion to this is there a reason, or is there a way in the future that's going to say that if you do 1080p and they embed this into a web page, it'll still be 1080p? The reason they got was that the SDK does not allow 1080p to be embedded into a web streamer.
Yeah, I believe that is correct.
And is there any change for that in the future, possibly, or we don't know?
Not that I have anything to be able to share, and I haven't heard specifically about that.
No worries. Another question we have here, I think, actually the majority of these are Ed's going to decode for us.
Yeah, so I think the one that the thing that makes sense here, like I said, AV Trainer. There's a bunch of, and maybe Kevin can look at his questions that are here in the Zoom and pick some of that apart. But the one that I think that is worth reading here right now in our limited time, since we're actually over the hour, would be that for those that routinely need either multi-language or dedicated multi-audio support, how much can the larger scale Zoom events in each of the platforms, meeting, webinar, Zooms, and on Zoom, really support in terms of simultaneous language interpreting in both captions and secondary audio channels? So how many captions wise, let's break that down first. Captions, how many languages are supported currently?
So captions kind of officially only supports English. Captions is just one language. Whatever you're typing into it is what it's showing. That is the limit on captions. The other one, talking about live interpretation, where you have interpreters, third-party interpreters connecting up, joining as an interpreter, being assigned to a language. Each time you create a pairing, they are kind of bidirectional. So if I have an English to Spanish translator, it also lets them select whether they're English to Spanish or Spanish to English if they were doing a two-part. From there, some of the limitations, if I remember correctly, I think we have, 16 built-in languages or something? And then you can create, I believe it's 6 custom languages where you get to say like, okay, this one wasn't on the list, but I have a translator for X. I believe it's 6 of those. So somewhere on the support site, it says you can have 6 languages. It actually says you can have 6 custom languages, plus you could have interpreters for every channel that we already have built in. So it's a pretty significant number.
Now, I have a question, I guess, related to the captioning part of it. If you were using a third-party captioner, like through the token or whatever, it's still only going to be one caption at this point.
Right.
Whatever language it is, it's only one caption.
Exactly.
Okay. That would be something I think people would request, support for more of the same, and maybe have a toggle similar to the interpretation, like what language, even if you don't support it as the AI with live transcription, if maybe that was something that could be added. So if that's something that you can bring up the chain, I think people would be appreciative. Somebody had asked me the other day too about ASL interpreters, American Sign Language, and I think the question, if I'm trying to remember the scenario, the question, it might have been actually Jeff. Were me and you talking about that? And we were saying, it would be great to be able to provide a special breakout room that makes the ASL interpreter a larger window or something like that, because honestly, that's really what has to be the focus for the people who need that sort of thing. Jeff, maybe I don't want to butcher your thought, if you want to just share that again real quick.
Well, it's I work pretty closely with.
We're getting a little crunchy audio from you.
Oh yeah,
so
sorry.
Just watch. I think it was where your connection is to your mic. So just don't shift too much.
Yeah, just interrupt me if it does it again. So I'll be doing this weekend, but not in Zoom.
but through vMix. Single vMix will send out English and a Spanish broadcast and an ASL broadcast. The reason there's a separate ASL broadcast is simply we've decided we're not going to offend the ASL audience by making them feel and appear insignificant with a picture-in-picture. And so we dedicate a channel to them, so they're full screen ASL signer, and the picture-in-picture is actually the primary program. And so that's secondary there. And so it'd be nice to be able to simulate that, because ASL in Zoom and Zoom only is a minimum double spotlight, and when you stream out of Zoom, it doesn't stream spotlight. When you record in the cloud, it doesn't record multi spotlights either. And so the multi spotlight it has a real breakdown for archiving and or using Zoom to do the streaming versus a screen capture to stream as well. So it's a little tough. If an ASL signer could be designated an ASL signer, and then even have small, medium, large, top left, right, bottom left, right, kind of position and size, something like that, or a dedicated channel would be pretty slick. I mean, it's the multi-language is certainly is an audience that shouldn't be disregarded, and ASL as well shouldn't be an audience disregarded for most all events out there, for sure.
For sure, yeah, and that I think is a weak spot for us potentially at the moment. Of we cover verbal languages or auditory languages, I guess, and are missing out on ASL or the other visual languages, and that is a really good input. I think, to me, I agree. I haven't found a really good native way to do it right now, because multi-spotlight is, in my opinion, not a safe feature to use because of streaming or recording, or what version is the attendee on. Those are all really great reasons for don't use that feature. So from there, you're limited to kind of like the fake version of multi-spotlight is turn off all the other cameras. And that can be challenging, trying to get them all turned back on at the right times. So I think, to me, a lot of the best ways that I've seen ASL used has been with production involved, creating that PIP. And I really like what you said about flipping the script on that and having the PIP be like, hey, what's important? Turns out it's them understanding. And so, like, reversing that PIP structure, I really like that a lot. But production is kind of the place to do that at the moment. I definitely do hope that we are able to expand on that and find some better ways to do that. And I think we will find some ways to do that, both between some of what you think between this doesn't help you that much, because it's also like multi-spotlight. Immersive scenes, like multi-spotlight, is not a great feature for large events right now because of the feature parity across different platforms, mobile and desktop and streaming and all the other places. Once that comes a little more to fruition, and once Zoom Apps comes more to fruition, I think we're going to start seeing some workflows there with some pretty cool things you can do. Immersive scenes is just kind of like the first toe in the water towards being able to use Zoom to build composited video natively.
Great. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about. And then, yeah, continuing with doing it as production for now seems to be the way to go. But it sounds like you guys are at least always moving forward. So hopefully, if people put in requests for things like that, that's something that'll end up on the roadmap. And hopefully, Sam, you'll bring some of these things back, some of this feedback that we've mentioned. Ooh, Jeff, I think we're getting your crackles some more. Sorry. So with that, I see Leo's hand up, and then we're going to kind of wrap up. But go ahead, Leo.
It's an ending question anyway. At the end of a webinar or at the end of a show, Sam, I always like when I start in the practice session and you've got that ability to say, okay, audience, it's time for you to go while we have a wrap up. What do you do yourselves when you sort of get to the end? Do you just end and then go to another meeting to have that sort of post-show discussion?
That, or anytime, usually when my team is involved, we're doing our split thing. So our panelists aren't in the webinar at all. Our panelists are actually in a separate meeting where we're then taking them as video sources to switch down for our webinar. So we just end the webinar, or we turn them off to the webinar, let the webinar have a nice post-show play out with music and slides while our people are all in a meeting, and we're able to come on and say, hey, you're clear. Good job, everybody. We're working on that from the native side. That's all I can say. But good stuff, really good stuff is coming
Thank
to
you.
webinar. Really good stuff is coming to webinar.
Excited. As you know, we meet on Zoom webinar every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time here on AV Tech Talks, and we use webinar very extensively. So excited to hear about anything new that comes to webinar. So with that, I would just love to thank of course Sam and Kevin, but also thank the panel for all the great questions, the great topics, the great input. If there's any last words anyone from the panel has, we can take some real quick comments before we totally sign off for the evening. I'll go by raise a hand if anybody has anything. I don't think we heard from Chris all night, actually. I would love to make sure we don't leave anybody out.
No, I'm all good. I always enjoy listening to Sam. We had a meeting like last month or something like that, and he's always a wealth of information. So it's I mean, this was a great show. I mean, and a lot of great stuff talked about. I don't have any specific questions or anything like that. Just it was really great to be able to listen in.
Great, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Anybody else? We always have anything they would love to mention? I see Greg's hand. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, and I just wanted to again thank Kevin and Sam for being here, and just reinforce my appreciation for having the opportunity to have some direct dialogue with you guys. And I hope that this is just the beginning of continuing this kind of discussion.
Yeah, and of course, Sam and Kevin, the invitation to come back at any time is open. If there's new breakthroughs in the event specialist team, we would love to, that you guys have new products or something is available. We would always love to hear about it. So definitely an invitation to come back. Leland, sure, I can take a quick comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had one quick question about this whole Zoom events thing, because I was a little confused thinking in my head of how this is going to look or feel or be incorporated into Zoom. Is I expect it to be something just on the Zoom back end as like an events tab or something that you can follow up and watch where all your events are being structured and put together by your team. Is this what we're looking to see, or is this way off base?
It's more of a separate portal where you end up seeing most of that stuff. But then, and this, I'm not totally sure as it starts getting into multi-session and multi-track, but right now, like with on Zoom, when you create an event, a single session event, it actually shows up in your regular portal as well. So it does show up, like it'll show up in your meetings or webinars category, depending on what it is, but then you actually build it from onzoom.com.
Thanks.
Very cool. Very cool. Jeff?
If my mic is okay. Is it working okay?
Yeah, just don't move around too much.
Channels. Yeah, this is really screwy. I guess maybe this is just a technical walk-away thought. And no response needed. But this was, I had to brainstorm the other night. The challenge / decision is it's too difficult to train the audience, Spanish-speaking audience, where the language button is, to click on it, select Spanish as the channel upon arriving to a webinar. Okay, so that was the thought process. And so they said, well, how do we deliver Spanish by default when they arrive? And this webinar is going to be fed by a spotlighted video coming from a vMix console from the main platform, which is not Zoom. They'll be feeding it into a Zoom. They're a Zoom client, and they were going to say, mute the audio, and we'll create the translation a different way. I went to bed that night and I said, what if, and I've never done this before, what if we make the vMix operator also a translator? And instead of, and so he'll feed video and audio. but by default, that would be on the English channel, and he'd be feeding English. So I said, really, I don't want the audience to hear his feed. I want the interpreters to hear his feed. And therefore, he could flip the language switch, therefore feeding the Spanish audio channel, which hits the interpreters' headsets, and the interpreters run their switch backwards, if you will, language-wise, English to Spanish, backwards, so that when they speak, they're actually speaking Spanish out the default audio channel, which commonly is used in our space for English, but it would actually be Spanish the moment the webinar attendee arrived. And I think the routing itself works. The only thing that he said, well, you know, what if the audience member clicks on the language button and selects Spanish and it ends up being English? It's just like, you know what, that's what caused the thought process in the beginning. Don't tell me they're going to go do it so easily and naturally now. You just told me they wouldn't. So anyways, I just thought I'd throw it out there. I had never really thought about that, but we wanted to see if we could keep it simple without adding another vMix operator and so forth. So I thought I'd just throw it out there for thoughts and so forth.
So one thing that popped up in the chat here was the question of like, well, why doesn't it know that they're a Spanish speaking user, and why doesn't it default to Spanish? And the thing is, it does. It's not that the default audio channel is English. The default audio channel is original audio. From there, you translate. Your original audio could be in Spanish for all I know. Until you start adding interpreters, I don't know what your original audio is. So from there, it was on us to say that our original audio was English and I need you to translate to Spanish. I responded back to Jeff because Jeff sent me that question in an email, and my take was from a audience education perspective, the way I would start by approaching it is just in my pre-show slides, bunch of slides that like point right at the interface, like click here to change your translated audio, and then the host saying it and stuff. Obviously, this is not a perfect world solution versus being able to like somehow default them or read some of that stuff. But that's kind of where we're at today.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to dig into that a little bit more, Sam. So with that, I think we're going to have to wrap up for the evening. We got through, it looks like, pretty much all the questions. If we missed anything, please let us know if you're out there in social land on YouTube or Facebook. Join our Discord. I think we put the link in the chat. Maybe, Chris, if you don't mind dropping it in there again. Join our Discord where we continue these conversations. And, you know, all of our panelists, I think pretty much every one of our panelists is on our Discord. Maybe we can get Sam in there. I know he's a busy guy. But we'll figure it out. And you know, you get those questions. There's a lot of resources for Zoom, especially in our community. So we'll be able to try to help you out with some of those answers. Again, I want to thank our panel. I want to thank you know, Omar and Bodhi first for helping me wrangle all the questions. Sam and Kevin for answering all these questions, doing a great job tonight with all the information. Dave, Andrew, Leland, Leo, Marty, Jeff, Justin, Greg Gibson joined us a little late, and Chris. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight and helping with the panel. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the DVE store for their continued support. That's how we're able to give everybody who's watching a 1080p experience. So when you watch AV Tech Talks every week at 7 or 9 Eastern on Monday nights, you will get it in 1080p, whether you watch from the Zoom webinar or Facebook or YouTube, and that is directly from the support of the DVE store. So please visit them at dvestore.com. Let them know that you heard about them from AV Tech Talks. They love to hear that kind of stuff. So please just go let them know. Guy Cochran and his team are amazing over there. They can help you with any of your gear needs that you have. So with that, again, thank you very much. We will be back next week. Oh, and actually I'm springing this on our panel right now, but next week we wanted to look at people's setups. So I hope all of our panelists will join us, whether you're on a $10 or $30 webcam and built-in ear pods, or you know, you've got a crazy setup. We want to do what I'm calling
or a monster machine.
Teardowns. What's that?
Or the monster machine, as I call everything over here.
Yeah, there you go. If you've got a mothership like Greg Gibson, you know, we want to see it. So I'm calling next week setup teardowns. So if you've got a setup Leland's showing us right now. He's tearing everything down. That's scary. You pull the curtain, and my big head was over there behind it. So that's I feel like the wizard. But yeah, so if you guys join us, if you're watching and you have some setup that you want us to look at, please join us next week. Let us know you want to be a panelist. We'll bring you up and we'll take a look at what you got, and we'll tear it down, and we'll look at why did you choose certain things, and how do you think these things work, and what would you wish you could do differently. Justin, I hope we get you here, because I know that you do a lot of testing with a lot of different setups. So a guy like Justin Butler would be great. Marty, any of you guys, and Greg Gibson, your mothership always impresses me. So hopefully you guys will join us next week, and we'll be able to kind of go through some of that stuff. But for now, we're super heavy on the night tonight. But thank you all for being with us. We're going to say goodnight to YouTube and Facebook. And we will see you all next week here on AV Tech Talks. Thanks.
Thanks, Zoom.